Now let's go ahead and look at navigation in 3D Coat. It's super easy to learn because there are no hotkeys to remember. If you hover outside the object, click and drag, you can rotate about your model. If you middle mouse click and drag outside the object, you can pan. If you right click and drag outside the object, you can zoom. Now it's important to note, without hotkeys, you have to start outside the object. Because if you start inside, 3D Coat assumes you want to work on the model. But once you move your cursor outside, you no longer see that brush. So 3D Coat assumes you want to navigate. If you hold down the Alt key now, that tells 3D Coat that you indeed want to start navigating, but you want your pivot center to be where your cursor is. You'll see a little tiny axis underneath your cursor, and that indicates the rotation center. Once I make the initial click, the axis will remain fixed on that point to serve as the visual guide. You can change that in the camera menu at the very bottom. You can change it to world center, last draw point, a custom point, object bounding box, but the most common one is current pick point. And then you can assign camera shortcuts. You have different views here, front, back, and so on. You can change to an orthographic view by clicking on the little cube widget, and obviously you can use hotkeys for these different views. Now, customizing your navigation, you have a few different presets that you can utilize. You can also modify this current set. You can add events, and then when you're done, you can store the preset, and you can reload it at a later point if you need. You can also navigate from the navigation bar with these three icons. You can rotate, pan, and zoom. Now that that is out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about our brush radius. If you want to scale it on the fly, you can right click and drag left to right to do that. If you right click and drag up and down, you can increase or decrease the depth value, or you can adjust that here as well. But you can also see your brush profile when you change it in the brush alphas. You'll also notice your brush alpha will be reflected inside this brush radius. Now let's look at some common elements you'll typically find in the user interface. If you look on the left hand side, you have tool panels in practically all the rooms. The lone exception being the render room. Then just above the viewport, like in Photoshop, you have a toolbar that has some common parameters based on the tool that you're using. You can see how it changes contextually. The most commonly used panel will be the Tool Options panel. And as the name implies, it contains tool-specific parameters and buttons. Some brushes and tools will have parameters, others will not. So if your panel is free-floating, you'll notice that it disappears when you select one that doesn't. You also happen to have a brush options panel, much like Photoshop. And then you have asset panels like the brush alphas panel. You have folder presets here. It may take a while to load them depending on how many brushes you have in a particular folder. Okay, and strips is very much like brush alphas, except it repeats along a brush stroke. You have color palette. You also can access from the Windows pop-ups menu color swatches as well. You have stencils. And smart materials. And then you have presets, which allow you to store all the settings, including brush alphas and any other things that you could possibly adjust for a tool or brush, and then store it as a preset. And this saves you time from having to go back and make adjustments all over again. This works in the Sculpt workspace, Retopo, Paint, doesn't matter. You can use presets in any one of these. all these panels have the toggle in the upper right hand corner that will give you some options. If you have made adjustments on a particular brush and you want to store that as a preset, you can go to the upper right hand corner and choose Add Preset. You can save a group of presets that you already have stored. You can reload them later on. If you make an adjustment to a current preset, you can update it by right-clicking on the preset itself and choosing Update Presets. And then lastly, you have layer panels, which we looked at earlier. Here in the Paint workspace, you not only have the Paint Objects panel, Surface Materials panel, but you also happen to have your Paint Layers panel, similar to what you have in Photoshop. So once more, in the Retopo workspace, your layer panel would be your Retopo Objects layer panel, and you can see some familiar icons regardless of the workspace. So in the Sculpt workspace, the Voxtree layer panel is your layer panel. You can see similar icons at the bottom as well. And you can render Sculpt objects or Paint objects or both at the same time if you like. And you can even choose to have 3D Coat show the Retopo mesh while it's rendering. So that's a quick overall look at the user interface. In the follow-on videos, we're going to go a little bit deeper into each individual workspace. So stay tuned and thank you for watching.